Welcome to the Gourds and Pomegranates podcast, talking common sense for church communications. Here's Hannah and Joe.
You don't have to be in a church comms role, or to be honest, well, any kind of comms role for long before you start to feel daunted by video.
Yeah.
Everyone keeps going on about it and how amazing it is, but it can be difficult and time consuming and really difficult if you're balancing comms with a number of other roles within your church. So the question needs to be asked, do we need to be thinking about it as part of our comms strategy? And I suppose there are a couple of advantages we'd want to go through first to say why it is a good thing. The fact is it gives you variety of content. It adds to the many different things that you could be and should be creating online. And it's just a fabulous way of mixing it up. And even actually what you can create with video is just such a diversity. And I love video. It's just incredibly creative. I'm just going to put that out there now. I do love video. But to be honest as well, I don't want to say it's cynical thinking, but it's the way the algorithms are going. They want you to make video, partly because we have become very lazy in our consumption of content, which again is not a great thing. But because we've become lazy, that's the algorithm goes, well, we'll favor content that is video based.
Yeah, and if it's kind of human nature and that's how people are consuming content, then it's not to say we should exploit it, but we should seek to communicate to people with how they are actually consuming stuff. And yeah, the cynical side of things say it's because of the algorithm. And the reason the algorithm is doing it is because they want to keep people on the platform longer. But at the same time, if that's what they're pushing, then why wouldn't we use it?
Exactly. It's kind of all feeding into itself. But I think as well, the fact is that a picture can speak 1,000 words. So using more visual content is brilliant, but a video can do so much more. And I just think we should be utilizing them. And yeah, it's people, we've become lazy in consuming them, but actually the artistry and just how amazing videos can be, people aren't lazy when they're creating them. I think it's a really lovely way of honoring people who God has given the gifts to do video.
Yeah, and we'll get into some really practical tips about this, but the reality is video is so much easier to make now than it was 5-10 years ago. And not just making video full stop, but amazing quality videos now that you can make so easily. So we want to consider, if you can do it, how do we do it well? And how do we do it without causing too much extra stress? And so something that we've already referred to on a podcast, and if you listen to the episode, you will be familiar with all these things, but that's content repurposing. So using content that's already there. So thinking about a sermon recording, that could well be video, and you can put it out there either as a whole thing or as clips. Reusing content that's already there is great. But also in that repurposing, we covered making content around content which is already there. So for example, filming some little videos after the service, reflecting on the sermon. Again, these are all things we've covered, but just ways that we can bring video in at that low level, but without causing too much stress. And then telling other people's stories. So telling stories from in the church, rather than having to create content from scratch, to write a script and say, what am I going to make a video about? There's so much content already there. So all of these things are great and they're content ideas, but depending on how we actually approach the videos, we could still take any of these content ideas and spend an entire week creating a single video. Now, obviously that's not sustainable. So how do we approach things? And this approach can work in a couple of ways. And so really it's not an either or, it's a bit of a spectrum, but thinking about casual videos as opposed to polished ones, which you might do more occasionally. So casual videos tend to be filmed on mobile. They may well be filmed in portrait, but they're things which are a stream of consciousness, speaking to the camera. So it doesn't need a carefully written script. It doesn't need to be worded perfectly. And obviously you have the option to edit little things out if you wanted to. You could have multiple takes and choose the right one. But the point of this isn't for it to all be perfect. It's about the speed of getting a message out there without loads of effort.
Yeah. One of the things actually that I've just thought of for an example of that was in the pandemic when people were doing like a prayer walk. It was really casual, like you say, and they were just sort of like, I'm walking, I'm talking and I'm praying. How can I pray for you? Really short, but it was just something that they were able to put out.
Yeah. And we're seeing more of these because as it happens, for whatever reason, these videos tend to land better with people. And it's kind of ironic that you can put hours and hours and hours into a perfectly edited video and it not land with people, and just start recording and speaking and putting it out there, even on a live stream. And it does land with people. So I think part of this is because it's just comes across as more personal, it's more human, also because you get straight to the point. But again, with these vertical formats, it's something that we've become much more accustomed to. You've got shorts on YouTube, you've got reels, you've got TikTok. And so people are used to seeing these, and people are used to not just the format, but seeing the realism where people are just kind of more open and honest and not quite as polished with the camera. So if it's something that people are used to seeing and it's something that takes us less effort, then make the most of that. But then right at the other end of the spectrum, you've got your sort of polished, really nicely edited, really nicely shot videos. And just because the casual videos can land better doesn't mean that we should throw away these crafted ones. So there are times when it is worth the extra effort. For example, you might have an introduction video on your website, or you might have a trailer on your YouTube channel. In fact, you can show a different trailer to people who already subscribe to you as to people who don't and are just seeing you for the first time. And these ones might be worth just taking that extra bit of care over. Maybe if you hold a big annual event or even your Christmas events, these videos that you create are going to be seen by more people. They're going to be shared by people in your congregation, therefore seen by even more people. So it's worth being a bit more polished for these. So it's okay to spend extra time. It's okay to put care into them. But obviously, as we've said, it's not sustainable to do it for every video. So if you try to go in with a brand new video strategy and you're going to try and make everything really polished and really slick, you're going to end up failing, and you're going to end up using less video than you were anyway. We want to emphasize that it's important to consider the format, based on the different messages you're putting out there. And that goes for video full stop, not just the quality, which things will land better via video, things which are easier to show than to describe, or things where you need to communicate some emotion behind the words that would just be written on a page. So thinking about the format of whether it's worth having a video or not, thinking about how much time is needed to go into each of these videos and whether it needs to be sort of casual or more polished.
Yeah. And I think it's not pressuring yourself to feel that you've got to do kind of one or the other, but actually doing what you're able to do, but what's also best for you.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day as well, we want to say, have fun with creating the content.
Yeah.
Because I've had it with films I've made of you've had a nice day doing it, and then actually it keeps you motivated when you're editing it, and then sharing it out. Actually, if you've had fun doing it, that does translate through the videos then. And
for sure.
If you've got stories to tell or announcements to make or something, that actually just sort of feeling positive about it does translate, even if it's behind a screen.
Yeah, that's really helpful actually, because we just put out a video for our Christian Business in Kent group. So we have an annual event called The Forum. Thank you. But I think part of the reason it was good was because so we worked with someone who's in the group called Elliot to help us make the film. But we genuinely had fun making it. We met beforehand, had a coffee, we had a rough script, and then we just had a bit of a laugh making it. And so that helped us to come across on video better. He did a really good job with the edit, but that means that I'm more keen to actually share it out there than if it was something that I wasn't really that proud of. So that is a key part of our marketing strategy for the event now. And that is a more polished video. But at the same time, in the lead up to the event, we will put out other smaller videos which aren't as polished. So we do, for example, a live stream with the guest speaker. That's not something that we're going to record and go in edit. We're literally going to stream it and then it's out there.
Yeah, good. I'm looking forward to the event. I've been inspired by your video.
It's doing its job.
Yeah. So with this in mind, let's have a think about how we're actually going to go about filming our videos. And the following, hopefully, will be quite useful. And it doesn't matter whether that is an individual project that you're going to do as a one-off or something that's part of a series or a collection of videos. And it doesn't matter where it lands on the quality scale as to whether it's something really high end that you're wanting to go for or something that's a bit more casual. Now, the first thing is sound. Think about getting either an external mic that's connected to your phone or camera, or simply shooting it separately. and you can automatically sync them up in the editing process. The systems now are incredibly good at reading the sound waves, squiggle things. Sound is hugely important to videos. If there's someone talking, a bad video with good sound is infinitely better than the opposite. So if it's a good video with bad sound, yeah, that's the right way around, isn't it? Being that actually having bad sound will just put people off and they won't engage. So sometimes it's more important to think about that than any of the other items. This is particularly important when thinking about sound is to if you've got someone speaking or being interviewed. So if that is someone that you're trying to tell a story or have it as part of a series, whether testimonies or something like that you're wanting to share out, in that instance, you really want to make sure that you're being honourable to them telling their story, but you want to that it's the audio that is the important thing you're trying to get across. If you're sharing something about how lovely the sunrise was this morning, that can be quite a nice, fun, casual video to share, but actually the sound is not so important on that.
Yeah, and if it's something where people aren't necessarily talking to camera, then you'll probably just get rid of the sound anyway.
Yeah.
Or you'll put some stock sound behind it, or you'll have some music, so it's less important. But yeah, when there's someone speaking, bad audio will just switch people off straight away.
Yeah, exactly. So if you are doing like an interview style something, or where you want the audio, is always just having a kind of backup of some alternatives. So if you can record the footage at one point, so actually you change the style of it slightly, and then you record the audio separately, so that if they're still telling their testimony, but rather than a talking head, they're talking, but you're doing a lot of B-roll or something, which then takes me on to B-roll. These are the kind of extra bit of footage that you can cut away to, and these normally kind of a couple of seconds to a little bit longer, but it helps to give a kind of flow and extra context and sort of a bit more visual interest in the video. If it's just me talking, that's okay, and that'll do. But actually, if it's someone talking about coming to church for the first time or something, why not add some extra little footage of walking into a church? It doesn't have to be their first time, but just to kind of give like, oh, this is what it's like coming into a church, or praying or something like that. And they're really helpful because actually they can cover over awkward edit points, or you kind of avoid a jump cut. And I mean, I've had it of I pull a face slightly, but what I said was good, but I don't want you to see that I've pulled a funny face. So actually putting a kind of like B-roll over the top of it, but you can still hear what I've said, means people don't have to see me pulling a silly face. And if you're thinking about, well, what actually can this be? It's helpful to think kind of like whether you do hands or different angles, behind the scene type shots, and actually that can be quite fun to include a camera if you're doing kind of a more higher quality type video, or something that's nearby. So if you're filming near a river, shots of water moving, and this isn't something that you have to have shot then and there. It could be something you say, I'm going to come back to, or actually I've got some footage that I can use already. It's always helpful to have a bit of a backup, or something that's a relevant thing. So if your subject is talking about building repairs, again, have shots of a building. It's just sort of, obviously people know what a church building looks like, but it just helps to kind of expand on the story that you're telling within your video.
Yeah, it definitely helps the storytelling. And I think it's the reason as well. I mean, having the B-roll, which is completely separate to the actual shoot you're doing, is helpful. So like the things like the building, you might be shooting inside the building, but the B-roll you take outside. Yeah. But like we're saying about the sort of context, so including the camera or including people's hands, you will find it a lot easier if you are able to have a second camera. And again, that doesn't need to be expensive, but if it matches the first camera, even better. The reason being that not only can you choose to pull back and include the camera, but you can have a different angle to cut to with the same action going on.
Yeah.
So if you're zooming in on someone's hand, you're not having to say, right, can you just talk for 30 seconds and I'm going to film your hand? Because immediately all of their attention goes into their fingers and they feel really awkward. But if you're getting that whilst they're talking, then it will cut together quite nicely. And another tip, and this is more in the edit, although it's worth bearing in mind when you're filming, is that if you just cut away to one shot and then cut back, it can be a bit jarring. It's more helpful to have 2 or 3 similar shots that work together contextually, and then you can cut back to the subject. Because otherwise you run the risk of it looking like you're trying to cover over an awkward cut. it looking like you're trying to hide Hannah making an awkward face.
Yeah.
But there's a really helpful video which we'll put in the episode description, which is all about shooting B-roll. It's from the perspective of a YouTube channel. It's called Learn Online Video, the channel. But it's kind of from the perspective of a vlogger. But just really interesting to see how they approach it. Some little tips that you can get there. So yeah, we'll put that in the description. I
mean, one thing that I think about, I can't remember where I heard it, but I heard it from a filmmaker once saying, if you're shooting B-roll, like especially if you're just doing it quite quickly because, I've walked through the church grounds and we wanted some extra building shots. I'm going to take a little bit of video, is to do it for 10 seconds. Even if you don't need 10 seconds worth of that B-roll, the fact you've got 10 seconds is really helpful for editing, whether actually you need to clip it and crop it or speed it up or something like that. So I always think, even if I only need 2 seconds of it, I'm going to record 10 seconds just to sort of be on the safe side, which one thing 100%. That I found quite helpful. And then to kind of think on diversity of angles and keeping it an interesting story or an interesting video alongside your story is to kind of fake different angles. So you can do these a couple different ways, whether that is sort of cropping intentionally or digitally sort of zooming in so that you look like you've taken it sort of at a slightly different, closer angle. But at the same time, don't overdo it because that can end up sort of looking a bit blurry and you end up having two very different quality of shots, which most of the time then isn't intentional and it just looks a bit messy. So if possible, it's always good practice to shoot in 4K if you have the option. Even if you're going to publish at kind of a lower resolution, you just putting yourself in a better position to have as sharper visuals even as you crop in.
And again, there's this idea of using a second camera. So that doesn't necessarily need to be for B-roll. It could just be a second angle on the action that's going on. And again, if you're already doing external sound, then syncing them up will be easy.
Yeah.
That's another thing. When you are syncing sound, still shoot sound on the camera. Doesn't mean that you have to just turn the camera's mic off or anything, because that sound is then really helpful to sync things up and do it automatically. But just having that second angle, it gives you the options, and you can cut between a shot of two people talking to each other to a closer up shot of the one person talking. And you may not even see that there's been stuff cut out there. It gives you that flexibility, and it helps you to cover over any sort of stumbles or hesitations if people have said the wrong thing.
So we've looked at the filming sides of it. What are we actually going to be saying? So speaking of which, it is better to work through key points rather than a script. Be guided by what you want to say rather than having to absolutely read something and it sounds really stilted and awkward. Having key points and sort of a guide just helps you to speak more naturally.
Yeah.
And especially if you're having to read something, you're kind of looking off camera and it just feels very awkward then. And people can tell that you're just reading off a script. If a script is really essential, if people really struggle or is something they're having to specifically say, you can get some cheap auto cues that work with phones and tablets, or again, sort of break it down, record in sections where you can then sort of cover up bits with B-roll. But obviously that does include a bit more work.
Yeah, for sure. So moving on to lighting. So this is another sort of technical area. And, we don't need to tell you that it's possible to make these videos using your phone. That's obvious these days. You can get amazing quality from even like not the top end phones.
Yeah.
But if you think about your lighting, it will make even the worst camera look so much better.
Yeah.
If you're shooting somewhere that's well lit, it will make the video just look so much better. So if shooting outdoors isn't an option, and sometimes it's not, definitely it can be hard to control sound outdoors, then choosing a well-lit room to film in is really essential. With that said, even really cheap lights can help. For my webcam, I use a £2 LED RGB light that I got off of a Chinese website, and it makes the world of difference.
Yeah.
Obviously it's not going to be as good quality a light, but it's going to look so much better. You're not going to have that noise on your camera, which comes from it being too dark. And if you do find that the lighting, either natural or from another source, is too harsh, then diffusing it. So either like using some tracing paper or buying something that you can shine the light through. It will just make the light spread out a bit more, be a bit less harsh. You could look at bouncing it off with a reflector because they're not expensive. But again, it's just a case of thinking about making sure everything is nice and lit. And that might go for, thinking about what time of day you're filming as well, maybe even the weather.
So then we go on to editing. What are we actually going to do? First thing is just don't overthink it. We're not making fast-paced, overly polished music videos or a blockbuster Oscar nomination film. Spend a little time mastering the basics of editing, pace, and sort of the moment where edit is really important.
Yeah.
And it's always helpful. And there's so many, just watching kind of some basic editing guides on YouTube, can really help you just to kind of pick up a few new tips and think about how you can improve on each one.
Yeah, definitely. So thinking of a more polished video where there is a little bit more editing. So for example, the trailer for your YouTube channel or to go on the front of the website. As helpful as video can be, it's also not one size fits all. So you want to make a video which is helpful for people if they do watch it. But what if they don't? You can't replace all text and visual content with a video. Even for myself personally, as much as I love video and advocate for it, I will often scroll past and skim read text because I can read that at my own pace. Whereas a video, I'm dictated as to how long that's going to be. True. So do what you can to make the video, it needs to contain the information that you want to communicate. It needs to be appealing to everyone. You need to make it not too long so that people don't get bored and so they actually do get that communication. But don't think of that as the only thing. If people choose not to watch it, make sure that they've got another option to actually find that content.
So the last two tips are just really practical ones. Have backups of the final video. Keep offline copies of your video, both the final product and the footage that you've used, just in case they're taken down. But, it's helpful just to keep their original quality rather than trying to download them from somewhere else. It just means that you can reuse it for future films, and essentially you're then helping yourself by creating kind of a mini archive of B-roll and footage and a portfolio of films that you've made.
Yeah. And that's something that we've suggested for photos as well, is just keeping that good archive.
Yeah, absolutely. And then finally, make sure you share it out. Just because you've uploaded the video to your YouTube channel doesn't mean it's really going to have the visibility for people to see it, or that people might not see it straight away. So get sharing, whether that's linking it in a post, embedding it on your website, putting it in a blog post, or having a link in the newsletter. Get it out there. If you've gone to the additional effort of recording and editing video content, do what you need to do to get it in front of people. And this means including it in your overall comms plan, because as great as video is, it's most effective when used as one part of a wider strategy.
Gourds and Pomegranates is brought to you by Joe Gallant and Hannah Fleming Hill. You can find episode transcripts and contact the show via gppodcast.uk.